All right. Oh, there we are. Hey, hello. I'll wait just 1 minute, so we'll officially start at 5 o'clock. Um, oh yeah, I can type in there. Oh, Rebecca and Kelly, just who I'd expect, and Ted and Andrea. There we go. There we go. And there's a lot of people on here. I'm getting like John Muir level beard here pretty soon. Gotta smell the water. I don't know. That's like reactionary to tasting the wine. I'm like totally weirdo. Um, all right, now it's 5 o'clock. I'm gonna give it one more minute. I'm gonna wait one more minute just to get people going. All right. Hi, Lisa, Kelly, Mary Sue, Ted, Andrea, Rebecca, Kelly. Blessings from Ray's. Oh, let me see. Hey, kid, is this one gonna be? Let's just give it a test. Oh yeah, here. And then the keyboard should be my this on here, right? Oh yeah, there we go. We're good. We're good. We're golden. We're golden. James. Man, I think you should open the Restia, the Ribera del Duero. James, open it's this guy, okay? Do that one if you're just gonna hit one of these friends, okay? I'm gonna be a creeper and look on our website here too. I'm just giving it one more minute, y'all, because we're gonna talk about how you buy stuff, because Raise is a commercial entity. Oh, Shiza. Shiza. Um, Events. I'm gonna see what's this look like now, kid. We got the price. Does it say that people can't pick these up until Wednesday? How are we gonna do that? You just want me to tell them that live? Yeah? What, you're gonna put it in? Okay. All right, there we go. Hi, everybody out here in waiting to do the Tempranillo tasting with us while I just kind of make minutia talk on the side, but I think we've waited long enough. So, what I want everybody to do, as you can see on the bottom left of the screen, that's the order that we're going to taste these wines. I hope, if possible, if you've got them all open, I hope you've poured all three of them. Cool. If you can pour all three of them, that would be pretty cool. Because I think we're going to go, if possible, we might do a little bit going back and forth between these. It's not, it's not tantamount. We don't have to do this, but I think it's best practice if we pour all three of these while we get going, before we get going. Especially because the first wine is pretty different than the other two. And for folks out here just kind of first time doing a virtual tasting with Ray is here. I'm Nate Norfolk. I'm the wine and spirits director. I'm also a certified sommelier. Thanks for tuning in. I'm gonna tell me when you have that ready, kid. You are? You changed it? Okay. So what we're gonna do, I wanna give everybody starting a little bit of an idea of how we'll do the wines. Like two of them, if you place an order for the wines tonight via the website, please put a pickup date of Wednesday the 13th or later. This allows me to get all the wines for everybody in a timely manner and have them all together at one time. Or else it gets very difficult to do this from a sales perspective. Cool? So if you want the wines, place them, place an order for the 13th. I've done significant discounts on each of them. So the first wine, the Malditos, is normally $12. It's $9.98. The second wine, the Restia Crianza Ribera del Duero, is normally $19.99. It's on sale for $15.98. The La Rioja Alta Vina Alberdi Reserva is normally $25.99. That's on sale for $21.98. I'll have you purchase all these through Ray's website if you want more of the wines in addition. Okay, which wine is first tonight? We did that. We answered that. The Malditos. I'll write that. Malditos. Oh, here we go. Is the first wine. The first. Wow, I'm really having a hard time typing. Is the first wine. This guy. This is the first wine, folks. The Los Conejos Malditos, which means the cursed rabbits. And I'll get into that. Okay, so thanks everybody for coming. I hope I went over the details of how we're going to do that. We're going to do as the order in which the wines appear in the bottom left in the screen. That's the order we're going to taste these wines in. Cool? So we're going to talk about Tempranillo here. As we can see, Spain's unique red, exploring Tempranillo. This is really the fine red wine that's indigenous to Spain. It's probably the thing that's the red wine that Spain is most known for, or the grape variety that Spain is most known for. For those new to this, a little bit of back about Spanish wine in general. Spain has, a 3,000 plus year old history of winemaking, and Spain has the most land committed to vineyards of any country in the world. It doesn't mean they make the most wine. France and Italy usually make more wine than Spain. Spain just has the most land committed to vineyards. All right. Can we have a time? Wait, hey, Nate. All right. I will answer the questions in Google Chat as they come up. Okay. I'll try. Thanks. Wow. Grilled octopus sounds pretty good to me too. All right, we're gonna get going. So I want if possible, have all three of these poured. Okay, Tempranillo. So where does this come from? Where does the word come from? Tempranillo is indigenous to Rioja, which is in the kind of northeastern part of Spain. The word itself comes from the phrase early, temprano, right? Because it's as a grape variety, folks love to plant this because it buds kind of early, which can be a problem in places that are really cold or have late frost. But for most intents and purposes in Spain, it's okay, right? And it ripens early, so you can harvest it before other grape varieties. So if you had a few varieties planted, you get to get this guy in before the others. It has compact bunches, and it has thick-skinned berries, which means because it has thick-skinned berries, the wine has great color. It makes a dark, opaque red wine. But if we overwater it or it's too hot, the wine can really get the yields can get out of hand. It can make thin, dilute wine if not handled correctly, because it can be very, very abundant. Like most grape varieties have that problem with them. But Tempranillo is really it's own animal here, and it's really of any significance. It's only grown in Spain. There's some, like when we look at this, there's some in Tuscany. People have brought in Italy. People have brought it to Australia. It's grown in California. But of any significance, this is a grape variety that's really unique to Spain. So other things about this, I kind of got into this. Like, it's moderate in tannin. This isn't like super, super, super thick, heavy wine like Cabernet Sauvignon or Petit Syrah or something like that, or even regular Syrah. This has, and there's a whole host of other red grape varieties that are fuller bodied. I always think of Tempranillo as a medium-bodied red wine. There's some, in some places it's grown, it can be even richer. There's different clones of it. In Toro, in Western Spain, it can be pretty monstrous. Let's at least first get drinking, because we need to get drinking. This is about wine drinking. So at least everybody should have this, the Los Conejos Malditos. Like, stick your nose in this glass if you've got it, or if you're drinking out of a tumbler or something. And give this thing needs air, man. Give it a spin, swirl it around. This wine, Tempranillo wines tend to be relatively aromatic, but like give this a little bit of time. You'll notice this was the one wine that was under screw cap if you were having it, and screw cap wines can be a little bit reductive, meaning they need. I always think like don't just jump and judge it right away. It's like the movies with screw cap wines, the movie is usually better than the trailer. Like just give it a little bit of time, because they don't have, they're deprived of oxygen, so they really, really want it most of the time. So we talked about this, and Tempranillo. Another thing about Tempranillo, it's not super acidic. I always think Tempranillo is a really good grape variety when people are first getting into dry red wines. It's a pretty cool introduction to show people that, drier red wines from Europe don't have to be very super acid driven or like really rustic and earthy. They can have like cool balance. Like, I love Tempranillo because of that balance. The moderate tannin, the moderate acidity really makes it a wine that isn't one of extremes. But that being said, it can make really, really wines that have super, super longevity. It's not weird to have wines from Rioja, one of these areas that are 40, 45 years old. It can handle it. They really, it takes a lot for Tempranillo to oxidize. Is it grown all over Spain is one of the questions. It's really more localized to the Meseta Central, the center parts of Spain, and kind of northern Spain. It is grown over, but it's really more this northern central parts of Spain. Tempranillo is also grown throughout Portugal, and the grape variety has it has a ton of synonyms, and we'll look at some of those. So it's really all throughout the Iberian Peninsula. I made it sound like it's almost all in Spain, but really Portugal has a ton of Tempranillo. Sue recommends having this with popcorn. Okay. And we'll get into it. It's Rioja is the most famous area for Tempranillo. Ribera del Duero, an area called Toro, to the west of there, to Navarra, which is contiguous with Rioja, and just north of that has a lot of Tempranillo too. We're going to have wines from La Mancha and Castillo, both grow a ton of Tempranillo. And as I noted down here, look, it plays well with oak. Oh, what do you smell, Nate? I'm going to get into this wine, but I'm going to talk about Tempranillo. Just we'll do this. So this is a wine. It's a cool red wine because we can really make some pretty beautiful unoaked versions, and then wines that have substantial aging in oak too, and they manifest themselves in pretty different ways, and we'll see that as we get into this. This is the third. Think about this. It's mostly in Spain, and there's a smattering of it in Portugal. But it's the third most planted grape variety in the world currently, after Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. In the last 20 years, we've seen an explosion of Cabernet and Merlot plantings globally. This has really changed. Like 20 years ago, they were not in the first two most widely planted grape varieties in the world. Now they are. Tempranillo is a close third, though. And there's a really rare Tempranillo Blanco. You're not going to see that. They grow it in Rioja. It's something that's in the last 30 years it's kind of come to light. There's a white version of it, but it's super, super rare if you ever do see it. There's all these synonyms for this, okay? So, Tinto Fino, you'll see Tinto Fino in Portugal, as you will see Aragones, also in Portugal. In Catalonia, we'll call this Uldayibre. I hope I'm doing that okay. Tinto País is a synonym in Spain. Cincibal is what this grape variety here, the wine we're having right now, the Los Conejos Malditos, this is from Toledo, kind of in just south of Madrid. And there they call their clone of Tempranillo, they call it Cincibal. In in Toro, we will call it Tempranillo Tinto di Toro. Tinto Roriz is also a synonym for this in Portugal. Hansivera, I have no idea where they call it Hansivera. Tinta Madrid, as you can imagine, is central Spain. Okay, now people are asking me about tannin or sulfites are the cause of hangovers. Dude, Brian, drinking too much is usually the cause of hangovers. It's the number one cause of hangovers. Tannins have histamines in them, and if you had a problem with sulfites, you'd probably most white wines would be really bad for you. But yeah, I mean, tannins and sulfites probably do contribute to you having somewhat of a hangover, but the number one contribution to hangovers being dehydrated and drinking too much, for sure. And what drinking too much is kind of a subjective thing, isn't it? Love the label relative to story on back, someone's saying. Can you clarify Rioja versus Tempranillo? Ed, I'm gonna clarify that a little bit later. Rioja is the region where Tempranillo is grown. Yep. So in all of these wines that we're having tonight, they're all 100% Tempranillo, okay? There's different synonyms for Tempranillo, it's tomato thing, but they're all 100% Tempranillo. Rioja is the region where the Tempranillo is. Rioja is the most famous wine region that produces Tempranillo. All right. Then people are asking me, what are we smelling when we have this Malditos, Los Conejos Malditos? So this wine's made from. I want everybody to take a look at this because we're really dealing with we're going to do three different wine regions here, right? And if everybody sees in kind of like this is just a map of northern Spain. I cropped it a little bit because we don't really need to see the southern part of Spain because we're dealing with wines just from the north. So you see where Madrid is here in the middle of this map, and then just southwest of it is Toledo. So this is where really this wine comes from. And it's a rather warm area of Spain. And this is done in, if everybody's looking at this, the label, we're going to see it says Tempranillo Carbánico España, right? So this wine's a little bit different. It goes through something called carbonic maceration, which sounds like this crazy technical term. All it means is that they start fermenting the wine. The grapes start fermenting before they destem or separate them. And they ferment them as whole clusters, and they do it usually in a closed environment. And what it does is it really increases a lot of the fruit aromas in the wine. You still make dry wine from this, but it kind of like ultra that fermentation the in the in a vessel that has very little oxygen causes certain aromatic qualities of the wine to be enhanced. Typically, like very explicit fruit aromas. So when I smelled this wine, it took just a little while. When I first smelled it, it was really closed up and had like kind of a little bit of an irony, like slightly stony character to it. Now that it opens up though, I get like explicitly grapey aromas from it. And it also reminds me of like wild raspberries. It has like a really explicit kind of raspberry character. Almost like, I mean, like folks that live in southern Wisconsin are very familiar with like, you know, raspberry kringle. It has a little bit of that, or like a raspberry / strawberry pie filling thing going on. Everybody getting that? I mean, you don't have to, but it definitely has that wild raspberry character to it. Big fruit. It smells a little dusty too, and not in a bad way, but just like still has a faint stony quality. So this area of Toledo is very warm. The winery here is called Mas Que Vinos. So I'll probably go back to this map when we were looking at it, right? Where Toledo is the first wine. The second wine comes from over here, Ribera del Duero, right? Which is also a relatively warm area. And then the third wine is going to come from right here, Rioja. So we're still on the Los Conejos Malditos. I'm doing this. Ooh, this came out a little blurrier than I thought it would when I see it on the big screen. I wanted to show you guys this because when we deal with northern Spain, we really are looking at this. They call it the Meseta Central, like the kind of like the central table. Like it's a higher because this is a topographical map, so it's showing elevation here, right? And we're really dealing with wines from this north central area that are high elevation and semi-arid, and the further south you go, the hotter it gets. And in the north here, we have a rain shadow from the Sierra Cantabria Mountains. And, oh boy, these are called the Centra Iberico Mountains, I believe, over here. But really, we're dealing with a mountainous, relatively high elevation area that's dry throughout most of the growing season. You'll get snow throughout northern Spain, though, too. So it's an area of extremes. And this in Toledo, where this wine comes from, has both like scorchingly hot summers and then relatively cool winters, and then it does this whole diurnal thing where it's hot in the day and then cools down deeply at night, which typically wine regions like that give wines that are both have like a crisp acidity to them, but typically a very ripe character at the same time. That's kind of the beauty of northern Spain. And once again, talked a little bit about about this here in the Meseta Central, where both really Rioja's at the fringe of this. So this is the one wine too that we're gonna have that doesn't have any oak. So everybody's drinking this too. Just crisp, refreshing, medium-bodied, mild acid. To me, this is a gulpable red wine to have with like tacos and burgers and pastas. You know, it's a Tuesday, you know, it's a Monday through Thursday kind of play. But that carbonic character of the wine, this is kind of in lieu of barrel aging this wine. They do this winemaking technique to kind of supercharge the fruit, yet still make a dry red wine. I always like carbonic maceration red wines. People do it a lot in Beaujolais, and it can kind of get poo-pooed on. But to me, it's a great way to make a young red wine that has a great fruit character, yet can still be dry and immediately approachable and doesn't take itself too seriously. Somebody's commenting, when you take the high-speed train from Barcelona to Madrid, you go through many vineyards. You sure do, because, man, this is the one thing. This is a relatively high-elevation, semi-arid area that doesn't get a lot of rain. and like grapes just work here. It's a really you know, it's a really great area for viticulture, but you know, you wouldn't want to. Nobody's out here growing a ton of other. You know, you're not doing like apples and cherries and stuff like this for cash crops. You know, like in an abundant way. All right, my guy Brian is like, what do stones taste like? Brian, what do stones smell like? Because this is always trippy, man. When you're smelling a stone, you're kind of tasting a stone. Like, you know, when you can smell gravel, like gravel has a scent to you. That's like kind of what stone. When I think of a stony character in a wine, I think of the way gravel smells. Because really, when we're tasting stuff, it's really a lot of it is because we're smelling it. Everybody good with that? Tempranillo Tuesday that somebody's commenting on. Any questions about this wine in particular? So it is organic. It's made from organically grown grapes too. So the winery is called Mas Que Vinos. We also make like I get like a oak aged Tempranillo, basic Tempranillo from these guys, which is a much fuller bodied red wine. Once again, you know, kind of commenting on the notes here, this is the Sensibal is that local clone of Tempranillo. And it's very windy in this area too. Limestone soils tend to be like, even though it's called limestone, it's low in acid, but creates grapes that have a little bit higher acidity. And limestone doesn't really retain water that much, so you get kind of darker wine. So a cool thing also that they do with this wine, they do something called, they do a bleed, meaning like when they first press the grapes, they pull off some of the juice. So what's left is like, you end up getting a more concentrated wine by that. And fun thing, this is called Los Conejos Malditos, the cursed rabbits, because these guys will lose, like, rabbits love to eat grapes and will get into these really, really bad and can take them out. So it's kind of play on the, you know, a horrible thing that can happen in these vineyards, which would really suck to have your vineyard wiped out by a bunch of rabbits. How common? This one goes well with Spanish chorizo. Yeah, should be. Yeah, this is super fresh. What I love about like Tempranillo like this is like because it's low in tannin, and isn't like a super heavy wine. You can pair it with things that have a little bit of a spicy character to them, or like real salty foods, where I find like very heavy red wines can kind of take on a bitter character, or even wines that have a lot of oak can kind of take on a bitter character when paired with like spicy or salty foods. How common is carbonic maceration as a technique? Like I said, most Beaujolais Nouveau actually goes through carbonic maceration. Sometimes a winery will do a small part of a wine through carbonic maceration to kind of give it those really appealing fruit character in the for aromatic purposes. It's common in California. It's very common in Beaujolais in France. It's becoming more and more common with certain natural wine producers. Tall rabbits to reach the grapes. Probably tall rabbits to reach the grapes. Rabbits can really stretch out. I hope that answers that question. This is fun. I think I think this wine doesn't take itself too seriously, but it is organic, and we see a lot of other really oak driven kind of versions of Tempranillo most of the time. Okay, we're gonna move on. So I'll go back to that initial. We're gonna move on to the Restia wine, which is from Ribera del Duero. I'll go back to that initial map. So this is Ribera del Duero, which is also a relatively warm, which also a relatively warm wine region. And up until Ribera del Duero was really like somewhat of a backwater for viticulture. Up until the early 80s, there were like less than a dozen wineries there. International, I mean, there's a whole host of things going on with Spain, post World War II that, and before World War II going on, that really, there wasn't a lot of development in Spain between, especially in viticulture, between like the early 20th century and like the 70s or so. So Ribera del Duero, this region, had less than a dozen wineries until the early 80s. Now there are 300 wineries there. The most famous winery in Ribera del Duero was a winery called Vega Sicilia. And we can see that this is in that kind of, also that northern central part of Spain. Duero refers to the Duero River, which literally runs through the center of the area. And this wine comes from just outside the village of Peñafiel here on the kind of in the western fringe of it. Yeah, man, you guys are all, a bunch of people are commenting on a variety of California producers that make carbonic wines, and some of them are really, really delicious. If you like this Tempranillo, I would suggest. I mean, I'm happy to recommend some other carbonic wines. Some people did already. There's a lot of Pinot Noir. Some Pinot Noir producers are doing it. Some folks in California do it with Sangiovese. This gives you a little bit of an idea of what the Ribera del Duero landscape looks like. Kind of reminiscent of parts of the Western United States for sure. Okay, so it's in the larger region of Castilla y León. Unlike Rioja, which we'll have later, it doesn't really. It's definitely a more continental climate that's cooler. That's cool in the winter, but gets very, very warm in the summer. These are always interesting. It's almost it's close to throughout about 2,000 feet elevation, so it gets up there too. And when we see hectares, like this says vineyard area here, when we look at a hectare is 2.5 acres. So there's over 70,000 acres of vines here. That's totally substantial. Once again, it's in the meseta. One thing we're gonna now let's give it this a little sniff, this Restia wine, and I'll pop back to this and talk a little bit about the aging. So Result de Peñafiel, I'm probably killing that, is actually the name of the winery itself. For the sake of selling this wine, we just call it de Restia because it's. Sorry, we're doing a little shortcut here. This is a Crianza wine, okay? So meaning whenever we see Crianza on a Spanish wine label, and I'll go back here. So when we see Crianza on a Spanish wine label, typically for red wines, these are aged at least 2 years. One of those years is going to have to be in oak, and then another year is going to have to be in the bottle of sometimes. That's the minimum, meaning it has to be 2 years old, and one of those years has to be in wood. And those barrels have to be what we would call barrique. They have to be a small barrel of some type. So, man, and I'll get into that when we get into the Rioja part about the small barrels. When we smell this, it's a drastically different wine from the Los Conejos Malditos. This has really got I get cedar and tobacco notes on this, and to me they're the primary characteristics of the wine. Like before I smell fruit character, I get savory qualities on it that are kind of more reminiscent of oak. Giving these a big swirl is not a bad thing. And the wine has a dried fruit character, and it's a little bit of a darker fruit character. I get a plum out of it too. It smells like bay leaf a little to me too. There's a lot of savory things happening with this. I know I said, talked about the stoniness of the last wine, but this, excuse me, a little tiny burp there. This has a little bit of a clay character to me, and I get like the cedar tobacco thing are really dominating those. And those cedar tobacco aromatics are really from, you know, I usually associate them with American oak. This is 80. They're telling me this is 80% French oak. I got two different notes on this. I'm kind of going with the 80% French oak, and they actually age it closer to 14, at least 14 months here. Yeah, and I think it's Chris is commenting like the more he smells it, the more vanilla. And vanilla is both a sign of just oak barrels in general, or oak in and of itself has the molecule that we call vanillin, which gives vanilla, its vanilla smell, is inherent in oak. And when we toast oak barrels, and they go through the Maillard process when we caramelize the sugars, that by creating the barrels, that aromatic quality is intensified. And it's very much so in this. Everybody should drink this too. Man, wow. A lot more body. Wow. And the vanilla to me is on the palate big time. Like more fruit really comes on, like dark fruit. I get kind of a current like boysenberry character to it. It's a lot of black fruits, which isn't always the thing I get out of Tempranillo. Isn't that wild? The tobacco thing is really cool with Rioja. Like I'm calling this Rioja, but like Ribera del Duero and Rioja wines kind of a really similar flavor profile. But Tempranillo, a lot of times, oaked Tempranillo has this tobacco thing going on. Man, and like a lot of times when I smell the cedar tobacco thing, if I'm blind tasting a wine, a lot of times I'll think it's Tempranillo. Um, yep, and I associate the cedar and dill. Sometimes I get a dill thing. I don't get the dill on this. Uh, this wine got 93 points from the Wine Spectator, guys, and I think deservedly so. It's pretty good for like $16 wine. This stuff is really rocking, man. Um, and it's got the beautiful character that I like about Tempranillo is like balance. It's never like it can be a really fruity wine in certain circumstances, but it shows off oak in a way that other it wears oak in a very elegant way. Like a lot of other red, like Pinot Noir in 80% French oak and 20, and with some of that being new, can be kind of clunky sometimes, or really the oak can kind of dominate it. But this, I still get the fruit and the oak and like savory things. Lisa, I get a fennel dill, but it's faint. It's like some Ribera del Duero and Rioja wines have tons and tons of dill. Kelly is saying that the wine is astringent. I can say that tannin and oak, grape tannin and oak tannin can sometimes come across as astringent. That's fair. Um, especially, man, this is way, way more tannic than the Malditos, the wine before. There's a lot more tannin to this. Really rocking. What would be a good food pairing? I mean, this is a red meat kind of thing. You know, the people like really will generically be like, oh, have it with paella. But sure, have it with paella because it's a Spanish wine, right? But I find that Tempranillo holds up really well to tomato-based pastas too. I love that it's not super super tannic. Um, grilled grilled meats or grilled foods in general work very well with barrel aged wines, and this has that barrel character. This has the oak character. Also, dishes that have like rosemary, especially, or thyme, are also or woody kind of herbs and spices work really really well. Um, I hope that's not too generic there. Ed says brisket. Yeah, dude, brisket for sure. That's a good call. Yeah, Spain likes to kill pigs and eat them, and they're really good at it. They I think Spain has perfected pork, guys. They're they're famous for that stuff, and like as much as like there's a whole pigs and Pinot thing, I'm kind of think Tempranillo and Pinot or Tempranillo and ham and pork and any manifestation is pretty awesome. Mm, mm. Whoa, sorry, I kind of took a really big sip there. Carmen is saying our friend in Willamette grows deep root vines without water. This is the whole association of these vineyards. How does this affect the flavor? Um, oh wow, good question. Here's a really interesting thing. Until 1996, you and this still varies. This is always so confusing to me because certain places in France and Spain still don't allow they don't allow irrigation. But until 1996, it was like elite. You had to dry farm vineyards in Spain. You couldn't. You literally maybe there were some exceptions to this, but like in most DOs or wine regions, you couldn't irrigate. If I'm answering Carmen's question, and I say this a lot, like with when we talk about wine and vineyards, it's like most historic viticultural areas, most of them operate under the idea of we wouldn't plant grapes here if we had to give them water beyond what naturally happens. And of course, there's exceptions to that, man. I mean, like we could talk about that forever. Um, Thoughts on this or questions? To me, this is like a red wine that's really, I won't say it's dominated by the wood character, but it really has a back and forth between like vinous, youthful wine character, um, or vinous, youthful, fruity character. It's showing some age, um, and it has a lot of oak happening on it too, but not an overwhelming amount of oak. Mm. I think this is serious stuff. Yeah, there you go. That's my comment. Okay, a little bit on this. See, here's where they differ from me. Um, so they do the initial fermentation in these really in giant temperature controlled tanks. We have to think about like Spain until like the 1960s. Spain didn't have like temperature like the Torres family in Catalonia introduced like modern viticulture in the sense of like using stainless steel tanks and doing temperature controlled stuff, where like Spain's in like about year 50 of really really honing it in on the fine wine game. And you got to think about this area. Ribera del Duero had some of the, in the early 70s 80s, had like some of the most historically like highest rated wines in the world from this winery called Vega Sicilia, that the wines are worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars. There were only 9 wines in that region. This Restia winery is like, this is a new kid on the block, but really doing wine at a very, very high quality for not a lot of money. And that's kind of what Ribera del Duero is about. Rioja has always been like the Rioja and an area called Priorat in Spain really are the places that demand very, very high prices for their wines. But Ribera del Duero is really on the heels as a wine region and like has a very, very high quality to value ratio, especially with some of the up and coming wineries in the area, for lack of a better term. I most definitely did say serious stuff. Okay, I talked a little bit about Ribera del Duero. We're gonna go on to any other questions about that, about Ribera del Duero, the wine in and of itself, or the whole idea of Crianza, which I'm pretty sure the connotation with Crianza is like, it means like rested. Because we'll move on and talk about like how I'll show a wine that's got a little more oak aging on it. Cool. Thoughts about this? Anybody? Questions? One thing I will say about this winery, does this age well? Yeah, I think you could lay this down for another 5 or 10 years easily. I think it's in one thing. That's a really great question. So about aging Tempranillo based wines, and something that's really, really, really cool about this. When you look at this wine, like I'll go back one thing. So this is 2015. This is the current release from these guys. So their current release wine is like 5 years old. Okay? And it's the Crianza, right? It's like it's not their youngest wine, but it's not their oldest wine either. So that's kind of the beauty of a lot of Tempranillo based wines in Spain. Is the history of this is such as that in the late 19th century, winemakers, especially in Rioja, really started to model themselves after after Bordeaux. And they went from using extremely large barrels to doing the barrique, or the small barrels. There's a variety of reasons why people think they started to use American oak here. A lot of it has to do with trade between Spain and America starting at the end of the 18th century, and American goods coming there in barrel and then sending back, American goods coming there in American oak barrels, and then them sending wine back potentially in American oak barrels. Also, in the 19th century, when these wines really started to come to prominence, France was going through what was called the phylloxera epidemic. So most of the vineyards in France in the late 19th century were affected by aphid that destroyed 50% plus of all the vineyards in France had to be replanted. And while that was going on, especially in Bordeaux, the folks in Bordeaux didn't have wine to sell, and their vineyards were devastated. And at the end of the 19th century, they started investing in Rioja, and actually some of them moving to Rioja, and bringing with them the current French winemaking techniques, which were to age wine in small barrels. And the folks in Rioja took this up, and they began aging their wines in small oak barrels in the way that the Bordelais, folks from Bordeaux, did. and emulated them in that manner. And then a series of aging the wines developed, Crianza being 2 years, Reserva being at least 3 years old, Gran Reserva being at least 5 years old. The beauty of these Tempranillo-based Spanish wines is the idea is that they're aging them. They're taking wines that have a potential to be aged for a long time, and they're aging them so when they're released, they're ready to drink. They're kind of doing the cellaring for you, which is really, really awesome. And these are at kind of value price points for wines that have some age on them. And whereas the wines of Bordeaux from the very great producers cost, 3 to 20 times as much as these wines do when we have them aged in French or American oak at this level. We talked about that. We're getting into Rioja. And as we can kind of see, Rioja is really kind of in really much further north in Spain, and it has some influence from both the Bay of Biscay and from the Mediterranean. It's a cooler climate than these other two wine regions. I'm showing you, this is Lopez de Heredia. It's just a picture from them because they're another historically significant winery there. But really, the first commercial wines that are gonna Nancy Gulata. How much of this wine do I still have available? I've got about 12 cases. I'll answer that roughly. There are roughly once again, oh boy. And it's really hard to type and do this. Sorry. Hey, Eric, can you link up our website? Yeah. There's about 12 cases of this left. So I was talking about Rioja. Here we are. We're kind of in, this is a cooler area than Ribera del Duero or Toledo, where the other wine comes from. It's a kind of beautiful, just gives you an idea. We're the Sierra Cantabria Mountains are just north of here. Gotta go back over here. Right. And this is what we look. Rioja's really divided. They've changed some of the the regions here, but they recently did a name change of these, but for all intents and purposes, people still use these three designations, right? We're looking at Rioja Baja, Alavesa, and then Alta. So today we're concerning ourselves with Alta, meaning the higher area of Rioja, where the wines tend to be, it's a higher elevation. The wines tend to be more balanced and have a crisp fruit character to them. Once again, Tempranillo is, relatively moderate in tannin and acidity. So these wines never feel oppressively acidic, nor do they feel really drying your mouth out tannin. They definitely have a dry character, but they're not the kind of tannin that hang out forever. So let's take us, we can smell this. And to me, this gets more on the vanilla side of things. things, and that's exactly what Deborah's saying. Yeah, like this here is more American oak, and it's when we get into a Reserva wine. So this is La Rioja Alta. I'll just skip to this. It's La Rioja Alta is the winery here, and the Alta region of Rioja is a subregion. And this is a reserve. This is Vina Alberdi, which is sourced from a variety of different places in, in Rioja. And it's what we would call, it's a Reserva style wine, meaning it's aged at least 3 years. At least 3 years. 2 of those have to be in oak of some type. In the case of this wine, they exclusively use the they do the first year in a new oak. I think most of it's American oak. They don't totally give this away, but that's more the jam for these guys. And then they rack it into older barrels, and folks in Rioja do this a lot. They move wine from, they make a blend and then they move it from one barrel to the next. So that's kind of like, that's almost like, it's called racking. And by moving a wine from one barrel to the next, you're actually kind of doing a filtration process at the same time. You're getting some of the dregs or the grape solids that have settled are left in that older barrel while you move it into the next. It ends up softening the wine out. It exposes it to oxygen. And, it gently exposes it to oxygen and gives you some of those, oxidative flavors. It also, and then they do top these things off. I'm kind of prattling here, but you get the beauty of Rioja that's Reserva like this is it's the idea once again is this is a 5-year-old wine that's kind of ready to drink right upon release. You can hold on to this. It's no problem if you want to hold on to it for once again, another 5 or 10 years. But this has that gorgeous, fruit, barrel, savory character happening all at the same time. La Rioja Alta is a very, very good producer. They're one of the oldest commercial wineries in Rioja. So when I say oldest commercial wineries, I guess what I'm alluding to is prior to the mid 19th century, there was a lot of viticulture going on in Rioja, but they weren't exporting wine. They were drinking it in the region, or they were selling it maybe throughout Spain in cask. Really, in the end of the 19th century is when these guys saw oh shit, hey man, Bordeaux makes a ton of money selling wine in bottles and exporting it all over the world. That's when Rioja started doing it too. They started, and that's really the end of the 19th century is really when Rioja becomes a fine wine region. I could talk for hours and hours about Spanish history between, 1900 and 1970. And man, is that ever a shit show of fascist dictatorship, a civil war, fascist dictatorship, under the fascist dictatorship, a forced kind of cooperativization of a lot of dairy producers, wineries, so on, virtually no international investment during that. Not much incentive for the wine industry to modernize. The whole first half of the 20th century is just a train wreck for the Spanish wine industry. And what's kind of cool about that, and something that we all can capitalize on with Spanish wines nowadays is because the rest of Western Europe really over the last 200 years, France, even Portugal, and Italy and Germany, even despite both world wars, they really modernized their wine industries and had and created international markets for them, and were all seen as fine wine regions. Spain didn't on the international scene emerge as really being thought of as making fine wine that was internationally marketed until the 1980s. And now we have a ton of outside investment in Spain, and it has all this old vine material, and it's probably globally the place that makes the world's best value wines, just in a nutshell. Oh, yeah. Oh, compare these. Yeah, it's weird. I was kind of struggling like what my order for these wines should be. I did this last because the wood is more intense on this wine. It definitely has more tannin from the oak. And to me, like the kind of vanilla dill cedar thing is like amped up more than in the Ribera wine. And this is darker a little bit. They're about the same alcohol. To me, they're strikingly like have a similar flavor profile. This is a little more refined and focused with the wood. Oh wow. One never expects the Spanish Inquisition. We were saying the same over here. Da, 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 da. Yeah. I guess I talked a little bit about like kind of the history of Rioja here. I'm going on and on now. What are people's thoughts of this? I'm kind of curious, you know. Oh, Ed asks, is it common for European makers to use U.S. oak now, or are they still French focused? I think I kind of answered that question. Rioja is really, really unique in Europe for the sake of using American oak. And a lot of these guys exclusively use American oak. Some of it is left over from the idea, like, you know, before, it was a long time before there was a rail system set up that would make it easy to bring like French oak to Spain. And let's be honest, man, like especially in the 19th century and the early 20th century, French folks kept the best French oak for France. And there wasn't really American oak or French oak being brought into the United States to make wine until the 70s. It's crazy to think about. Like we've only been importing French oak barrels into the United States for like 50 years, man. Before that, like, you were just using whatever, you were using American oak, and it's probably from Missouri or Minnesota. Like, the idea of French oak barrels was actually something that was, I'm pretty sure, and don't hold me to this, but I am almost positive that Dick Graff of the Chalone Winery in Monterey was the first guy to actively not only barrel ferment Chardonnay in French oak, but he actually brokered and used to sell French oak barrels here. And he was the first guy, and this is like early 70s or late 60s. He was the first dude to really bring French oak to the US. Whereas Spanish producers have been using American oak in Rioja since, oh my God, probably since like the 1700s. Once again, because we were sending products, we were sending American products in oak barrels to Spain. And that's how they got the wood. Much more going on. Love number 2, but 3 question mark. Or 3 has much more going on. Love 2, but 3 question mark. Carmen loves this. We kind of switched from a couple of Crianza to a case of Alberdi. Yeah, this is serious. This is La Rioja Alta is really one of the historically significant wineries in Rioja. They make another wine called Vina Alberdi, and then they do a couple different Gran Reserva wines too. Oh, people are chiming in. Cool facts. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. No problem, Ed. Um, the history of Rioja really is interesting in the fact that because the French wine industry was almost completely destroyed at the end of the 19th century, literally people in Bordeaux didn't have wine to sell, and they bought wine from Rioja to have wine to sell, and it created an international market for Rioja because Bordeaux was practically laid to waste, and because of that, folks in Spain and in Bordeaux really wanted to make wines in that model, so they'd have something in place of Bordeaux. It's pretty crazy, and the wines have some kind of parallels to them. I would say in general, though, what I dig about Rioja wines is that they don't have they're less tannic than Bordeaux wines, and because of that, like they after 5-6 years of age, they really soften out and have a super cool elegance while still showing those explicit oak flavors. Super unique wines, man. Like there's no place in the world that's really doing like kind of elegant medium-bodied reds like this that are kind of putting the oak in your face still, without it being overboard, man. I say in your face, but I still mean it's like it's not too much. Okay, so guys, if you like these wines, like I said, you can order them through Ray's website, and I put some pretty steep discounts on all of them. I just ask that you put your date for pickup on or after January 13th. Okay, I'm going to write that in there. Kid, are you able to do in the chat? Okay. Can you put that in there? Link up Ray's website and then please put an order date, a pickup date of January 13th or later. There you go. Have you ever done a Bordeaux versus Rioja tasting? I have to say, I've never had Bordeaux. Well, Becky, maybe we should do Bordeaux pretty soon. I was actually thinking about it. Maybe March or April, I'll do Bordeaux. I gotta say, Rioja packs a fuck ton of value, man. Rioja's there's a lot of value in Rioja. Bordeaux, you can find it, but it's harder. Like Rioja, baseline Rioja is super value orientated. And there's Rioja out there that's like hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but like, man, for 25, $30, you can get insanely good Rioja wines, like crazy good Rioja wines. I don't think I can do that with Bordeaux, at least not as consistently as I can with Rioja. Okay, that was a deep, weird, crazy sigh. Yes, Kelly agreed about 1 and 3. Okay, I ordered for pickup tomorrow, but you guys can adjust as needed. Ed, we're gonna adjust that. You're totally right, man. Ed, you're not gonna get your wine until after January 13th. Have things calmed down at Ray's since the holidays? Have you caught your breath yet? Hey, I'm just a pretty anxious dude to begin with, so like, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I got to do like transcendental meditation or like do my other hobbies or something. Yeah, but yeah, things are relatively calm here. I mean, calmer than it was the last week of December. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions about either of these? Was this a pretty good? I wanted to do the arc here, guys. So I think I did the arc. Is this the end of the PowerPoint? I think it is. Oh yeah. There you go. I'll kind of go back. Hope that was good Tempranillo stuff. Once again, to talk about Tempranillo, remember, moderate tannin, moderate acidity. You can age these things a long time. Man, I'm going to have a little bit more of this Alberdi because that's pretty good, huh? Home pour. How about record a podcast? We used to do a podcast. It was called Drank. I did it. We did it in 2018. Maybe. I don't know. We're talking about it. It's all about the mix of wines, Rebecca. Like the sum of the wines is greater than any one. Next time, can you put together the tasting note sheets that you do for live classes and have them downloadable before the class? Jesus, guy, really? I mean, we know oh, man. Yeah, maybe I can do that. Deborah, home pour. Appreciate the home pour verbiage there. Oh, dude. Whatever they're paying you isn't enough. That's the truth. Trotsky had a saying, Chris, and he said, nothing's too good for the proletariat. Oh man, Ted and Andrea, you're like, hey, if I ever need to be adopted, we're gonna work that out, okay? Thank you, Kelly. I know, man. Drink was awesome. The slides are pretty detailed. Good job on that too. Okay, if anybody wants me to, well, just all right, here. Email, I'll put my email in here, and if you want me to send you the PowerPoint, I will, okay? Yeah? Oh, you did? All right. Oh. I'll just say hit me with an email. Okay, guys, I'm gonna sign off pretty soon here. Okay. I'm gonna give it till we're gonna do another 5 minutes, okay? And then at 6:16, I'm gonna turn it off, okay? So like, let me know if you have any other questions. Oh wow, cheese, yes. Do you always drink on the job? No, only when I do these. That's really the only time. There's a lot of spitting going on. I would have spit, but somebody complained about it, and it's like it does sound gross hearing some just beardo spit into a bucket while you're doing this. Where was I going? You know, one reason I love cheese so much, but I personally tend not to do the cheese thing with the wines when I'm actually like tasting them in a professional setting, because it kind of like messes with my acuity of it. Cool seeing you in this format. Oh, Becky. I know what Becky you are. There you are. Oh. Looking forward to the Pinot event. Oh, yeah. Hey, let me plug the other events, guys. So on the 26th, I'm doing a Pinot Noir tasting. It's kind of like it'll be like a Burgundy, Oregon, Argentina Pinot Noirs with my buddy Katie Espinoza, who's an advanced sommelier. She's kind of the best. She's super, super smart. Love her totally. We're actually going to taste wine in the same room. It's going to be crazy. It's the only time I've tasted wine with somebody in the same room in 9 months. That's not my wife or a coworker. And then we're doing oh my God. In February, I have a Shiraz Petit Syrah tasting. That's the same format as this. And then I'm doing a Tuscan, kind of like a Tuscany Italian tasting. But the Tuscany one is like kind of like non-traditional wines from Tuscany. They're like two super Tuscans or two like Rosso di Toscano. Well, Rosso di Toscano, a super Tuscan kind of thing, and then a grape called Ciligiolo. So it's like, I called it value and variety in Tuscany or something. We had Shumai and Goyoza. Oh yeah. Probably pretty good with the Tempranillo. We love number one in our house. Yep. We did a 10-part bourbon tasting last night and used cheese and crackers as a palate refresher. Worked. Yeah, man. I mean, booze, like super strong booze will do it. It is every 2 weeks on Saturday. That is how the tastings work. It's this kind of format. Wow. I'm gonna have to I gotta be done drinking. I gotta do all kinds of paperwork when I'm done with this. All right, a Tuscan adventure. Well, guys, I'm gonna sign off real soon. So thank you everybody for coming. Like I said, remember if you want to order the wines, please put in an order date of the 13th or later. I'll have them all ready for you. I'll contact you when we've got them here. All right. Do you want me to end the stream then? Bye.